Space was quiet, cold, endless. A small alien scout ship moved through the dark, far from any star. Its name was the Rakthu. It belonged to the Zarkon Empire, one of the largest powers in the galaxy. The ship was fast, armed, and built for one job only: to watch, to spy, to find weak worlds before the Empire's war fleets arrived. Tonight, it was watching a small blue planet, Earth. The pilot, a young Zarkon soldier named Vren, leaned toward his screen. His scanners showed nothing unusual. No large fleets, no strange energy signals. Just a normal planet, full of a species called humans. His officers had told him humans were weak, primitive, not even a real threat. "Send the report," said his commander through the comm. "Tell them the planet is soft, ready for invasion." Vren smiled and reached for the switch. Then, for 1 second, every light on his ship blinked red. He froze. "What is that?" he whispered. There was no time for an answer. A streak of light cut across the black sky faster than his sensors could track. It hit the Rakthu directly in its core. The ship did not explode slowly. It did not send a distress call. It simply became a bright flash of light, and then nothing. Silence returned to space, as if nothing had happened at all. Far away, deep inside Zarkon territory, the Emperor sat on his throne. His name was Draveth Kor, ruler of over 300 conquered worlds. He was tall, proud, and used to victory. No species had ever refused to bow to him. No species had ever survived his war fleets. An old advisor stood beside him. His name was Kesh. Kesh was different from the other Zarkon nobles. He was quiet, careful. His eyes carried the weight of many old memories, some of which he never spoke about. A young officer ran into the throne room, breathing hard. "My Emperor," he said, bowing quickly. "The scout ship Rakthu has been destroyed." The room went silent. Draveth Kor turned slowly. "Destroyed? By what?" "We do not know," the officer said. One moment it was transmitting data. The next moment it was gone. No warning. No enemy signal. Nothing. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Which planet was it watching? The officer hesitated. "The blue planet, my lord. The one called Earth." For a moment nobody spoke. Then Kesh, the old advisor, stepped forward. His voice was calm, but there was something heavy behind it. "My Emperor," Kesh said. "I must speak." Draveth Kor waved his hand. "Speak." "I have seen this before," Kesh said. "Many years ago, before you took the throne, I served on a border fleet near human space. We sent one ship to test their defenses, only one. It was meant to be a simple mission." "And?" the Emperor asked. "It never returned," Kesh said. "No wreckage, no signal, no warning. The humans did not even seem to notice it was gone, as if it was nothing to them." A few nobles in the room laughed quietly. "That proves nothing," one of them said. "Ships are lost all the time. Maybe there was a malfunction." Kesh turned to him, his voice sharper now. "Would a malfunction happen twice, 10 years apart, with 2 different ships, in 2 different sectors, and never leave a single trace?" A junior officer standing near the back wall cleared his throat nervously. "My Emperor, if I may, we did manage to recover a fragment of data from the Rakthu before it was destroyed. A partial burst transmission, sent in the final second." Draveth Kor turned sharply. "Show me." The officer brought up the recording on the main screen. It was mostly static, broken and incomplete, but a few seconds of readable data remained. It showed Vren's sensor feed in his final moments. Calm, normal readings, absolutely nothing unusual, right up until every light on the ship turned red at once. "There is no warning in this data," the officer said quietly. "No enemy ship detected. No weapon signature registered. Whatever destroyed the Rakthu was either too fast for our scanners to register, or it was never detected as a threat at all until it was already too late." The room grew colder somehow, though nothing had physically changed. "A cloaked weapon, perhaps," one general offered. "Some hidden defense system around their planet." "Perhaps," Kesh said. "Or perhaps they simply do not need to show us what is coming until the moment it arrives." The room fell quiet again. Draveth Kor stood from his throne. "You believe the humans destroyed both ships. I believe, Kesh said slowly, that we do not understand what humans are capable of. And I believe that not understanding an enemy is more dangerous than facing a strong one. The Emperor studied Kesh for a long moment. Then he laughed, a short, sharp laugh that echoed through the throne room. Kesh, my old friend, he said, you have fought too many wars. You see monsters in empty space. Humans are a young species. No warp travel of their own until recently. No true empire. No allies among the Galactic Council. They are farmers and builders, not warriors. Then explain the two ships, Kesh said quietly. The Emperor's smile faded slightly. He turned to his war council. Show me everything we know about humanity. Everything. I want facts, not old ghost stories. An hour later, a large screen lit up in the war room. Data scrolled across it. Reports gathered over decades from spies, traders, and scouts. Humanity's history appeared before the Zarkon leaders. A civilization that fought many wars among itself. Then slowly, humans stopped fighting each other and looked to the stars instead. In just a few hundred years, they built ships, then faster ships, then weapons far beyond what such a young species should have had time to create. One general frowned as he read the numbers. Their weapons technology grows faster than any species we have studied. Something is unusual about them. They are inventive, another said, brushing it off. That does not mean they are dangerous in battle. Kesh stepped closer to the screen, his eyes fixed on one line of text. Look at this, he said. Human military records are very hard to find, almost hidden. But here, a note from a trader ship. It says humans do not fight like other species. They do not simply defend, they adapt. Every time they lose a battle, they change how they fight. Every time they win, they study why and improve even more. An interesting theory, Draveth Kor said. But theories do not win wars. Weapons do. And our weapons are far superior to anything a species like this could build in such a short time. One of the younger officers, a woman named Sella, stepped forward with a data pad in her hands. She was known for her sharp mind and careful research, and she rarely spoke unless she had something important to say. My Emperor, there is one more thing, she said. I looked deeper into old trade logs. Ships that visited human space, even just to sell goods, always came back with strange reports. Some traders said the humans were kind, curious, eager to learn about other worlds, but every single trader also said the same odd thing. Which is? Draveth Kor asked, growing impatient. They said human ports had almost no visible weapons, Sella continued. No large defense platforms, no warships waiting at the border. It looked completely undefended, like an easy target. Then it is undefended, one general said. This proves my point. No, Sella said firmly. Because 3 separate scouting missions from 3 separate empires over the last 20 years tried to test that weakness. None of those scouting ships ever returned, not one. If humanity truly had no defense, at least one ship should have survived long enough to send a final report. The room grew quiet again. You believe their weakness is a trick, Kesh said slowly, almost to himself. I believe, Sella said, that we are looking at a species that prefers to appear harmless until the moment they are not. Draveth Kor's jaw tightened. For the briefest moment, doubt flickered behind his eyes. Then it disappeared, replaced by his usual confident pride. Interesting theory, he said, but even if true, it changes nothing. A hidden trap is still just a trap, and traps can be destroyed with enough force. He turned to his generals, his voice hardening. Prepare the invasion fleet. We will not send scouts anymore. We will send strength, overwhelming strength. Whatever destroyed those 2 ships will not survive an entire armada. Kesh's eyes widened slightly. My Emperor, I ask you to reconsider. Send emissaries first, talk to them, learn more before— Enough, Draveth Kor said, his voice sharp now. I did not build this empire by talking to lesser species. I built it through strength. Humanity will learn what strength truly means. He raised his hand, and the war room erupted into motion. Officers rushed to their stations, orders were given. Ships in a dozen shipyards began preparing for departure. Kesh stood still amid the chaos, staring at the star map on the screen, at the small blue dot marked Earth. He remembered something from long ago. A conversation with a trader who had visited human space and returned shaken, refusing to speak of what he saw. At the time, Kesh had dismissed it as fear. Now, he was not so sure. "You do not know what you are waking," he whispered to himself. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy on the small blue planet called Earth, life continued as normal. Cities glowed at night, filled with light and movement. People walked home from work. Cars moved through busy streets. Children played in parks. No panic, no fear. Nothing to suggest that deep in space an empire was preparing to bring destruction upon them. Inside a quiet military base deep underground, a woman named Colonel Maria Chen sat at her desk, reviewing reports. She was in charge of Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Division, a small, secretive department most citizens didn't know existed. A young technician rushed into her office. "Colonel, we have a new detection." Maria looked up. "Another one?" "Yes, ma'am. Same signature as the last two. Something entered the outer system, sent data back toward deep space, then went silent. We believe it was observed." Maria's face remained calm, though her eyes sharpened. "Location? Same sector as before. It looks like another scouting attempt." She stood walking to a large monitor showing a map of the solar system, with small red markers glowing near its outer edge. "Third one this year," she murmured. "Should we alert Central Command?" the technician asked. Maria thought for a moment. "Not yet. We handled the first two quietly. No need to cause panic, but keep monitoring. If this pattern continues, they are gathering information for something bigger." The technician hesitated. "Do you think it's preparation for an attack?" Maria's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. The red markers blinked steadily, deep in the void beyond Earth's defenses. "I think," she said slowly, "that someone out there is finally curious enough to come looking. And when they do come, in force, they need to understand something." She turned to the technician, her voice calm but firm. "We are not what we look like from a distance." The technician nodded and left the room, but Maria stayed behind, staring at the map for a long moment. She walked to a locked cabinet in the corner of her office, entered a code, and opened it. Inside were old files, some decades old, marked with a single word: contact. She pulled one out and opened it. Inside were reports from the very first time humanity had encountered an alien presence. Quiet, careful notes written by scientists and generals, long since retired. The files spoke of a decision made years ago, one that very few people on Earth even knew about. A decision to prepare, quietly, patiently, without ever announcing to the galaxy what humanity was capable of. She closed the file and placed it back in the cabinet. Down in the lower levels of the base, far below Maria's office, massive doors lined a long concrete hallway. Behind those doors sat rows of machines, humming quietly, waiting. Only a small number of people on the entire planet knew what was truly stored there. It was not something built in a week or a year or even a decade. It had taken generations of careful work, hidden from public eye, built not out of fear, but out of the simple understanding that one day someone out there would come looking for a fight. Maria walked to the window of her office, looking up at the night sky, where stars blinked quietly, unaware of the storm gathering far beyond them. "Let them come," she whispered. "We have been ready for a long time." Back in Zarkon space, the invasion fleet was ready. Thousands of warships gathered above the Empire's capital, filling the sky in massive rows of gleaming steel. Cruisers, destroyers, and battle carriers, enough firepower to conquer 10 planets at once, let alone one small, primitive world. Emperor Draveth Kor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Ashbringer, watching the fleet assemble. Kesh stood behind him, silent, his expression unreadable. "This will be remembered as the day the galaxy learned true fear," Draveth Kor said, a proud smile on his face. "Humanity will kneel or humanity will burn." Kesh's eyes drifted toward the star map, toward that small blue dot marked Earth. "My Emperor," he said quietly, "may I ask one thing before the fleet departs?" Draveth Kor glanced back at him. "Speak." "If this fleet fails," Kesh said, "what will you do?" The Emperor laughed, a short, confident sound. "It will not fail. There is no possibility of failure. not against a species without allies, without empire, without true war experience. Kesh said nothing more. He simply looked once more at the small blue dot on the screen, and for reasons even he could not fully explain, felt a cold, quiet fear settle deep in his chest. Across the bridge, other officers moved calmly through their duties, checking weapon systems, confirming shield strength, reviewing star charts for the fastest route to Earth. To them, this was simply another conquest, another planet to add to the Emperor's long list of victories. None of them had seen what Kesh had seen. None of them understood why an old advisor's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of a console. Fleet status? Draveth Kor asked, his voice booming across the bridge. All ships report ready, my lord, an officer answered. Weapons at full power, shields at maximum. Estimated arrival at Earth system, 3 standard days. Excellent, the Emperor said, a satisfied smile spreading across his face. 3 days from now, humanity will understand what it means to challenge the Zarkon Empire. Kesh stepped closer, one final attempt forming in his mind. My Emperor, might I suggest we send only half the fleet? Keep the rest in reserve in case... In case of what, Kesh? Draveth Kor interrupted, his patience finally breaking. In case a farming world with no allies somehow destroys half of my armada? You have served me well for many years, old friend, but tonight, your fear has become tiresome. This fleet is unstoppable. No species has ever survived it, and none ever will. Kesh lowered his head slightly. As you wish, my Emperor. But even as he said it, something inside him refused to feel at ease. He thought again of the traitor who had returned from human space shaking, refusing to speak. He thought of the 2 scout ships that vanished without a trace. He thought of Sela's words, a species that prefers to appear harmless until the moment they are not. The order was given. The fleet moved forward, engines igniting one by one, lighting up space like 1,000 new stars. Ship after ship pushed forward into the dark, their formations perfect, their weapons ready, their confidence absolute. The Zarkon Empire was going to war. And somewhere, far ahead, on a small blue planet that had already destroyed 2 ships without even trying, something was waiting. Something patient, something that had been preparing for this moment far longer than anyone in the Empire could ever imagine. As the fleet disappeared into the stars, Kesh remained on the bridge long after the others had gone to their stations. He stared at the star map, at the small blue dot marked Earth, growing smaller and smaller as the fleet moved farther from home. You do not know what you are sailing toward, he whispered one final time. And I fear, my Emperor, that we are about to learn a lesson this empire will never forget. 3 days passed in silence. The Zarkon fleet moved through the dark like a slow, endless river of steel. Thousands of warships flew in perfect formation, battlecruisers as large as small moons, destroyers built for speed, and carriers filled with soldiers ready for ground invasion. It was the largest fleet Emperor Draveth Kor had ever sent to war. He wanted no mistakes, no surprises, no chance for humanity to escape what was coming. On the bridge of the flagship Ashbringer, Draveth Kor watched the star map with pride. Each dot of light on the screen was one of his ships. Together they formed a wall of power that no planet in the galaxy had ever survived. Status report, he said. An officer bowed slightly. All ships remain in formation, my Emperor. Weapons fully charged, shields at maximum strength. We will reach Earth's outer system within the hour. Good, Draveth Kor said. Let humanity feel the weight of what is coming. Behind him, Kesh stood quietly, watching the same star map with far less confidence. He had said everything he could say. The Emperor had made his choice. Now, all Kesh could do was watch and hope his fears were wrong. But deep inside, he did not believe they were. He walked slowly along the edge of the bridge, past rows of officers focused entirely on their instruments. None of them looked afraid. None of them seemed to carry the same weight he did. To them, this was simply another campaign, another planet added to a long list of victories stretching back generations. Kesh envied their certainty, even as he feared it. Sela, the young officer who had studied the old trade logs, approached him quietly. You still believe we are making a mistake, she said. It was not a question. I believe, Kesh said, that pride has a way of blinding even the wisest among us. The Emperor sees numbers, thousands of ships against one small world. But numbers alone have never decided every war in history. Sometimes the smaller side simply understands something the larger side does not. Sela glanced at the star map, at the small blue dot growing slowly larger as the fleet advanced. What do you think they understand? Kesh was quiet for a long moment. Patience, he finally said, and the value of staying quiet until the correct moment to act. Far ahead on the small blue planet called Earth, the world was calm. Sunlight touched tall glass buildings in busy cities. Cars moved along wide roads. Children ran through parks, laughing, chasing each other under clear skies. Millions of people lived their normal lives, unaware that somewhere far above their sky, an entire empire was approaching with the intention of conquering their home. Only a small handful of people on the planet knew the truth. Deep underground, inside a heavily protected base, Colonel Maria Chen sat in a dark control room, her eyes fixed on a large screen filled with data. Around her, dozens of technicians worked quietly at their stations, watching numbers and graphs that few people outside this room would ever understand. "Colonel," a young officer said, stepping toward her, "the object we detected 3 days ago has grown. It is no longer a single signal." Maria turned sharply. "Show me." The screen changed, revealing a massive cluster of shapes moving steadily toward the edge of the solar system. Thousands of individual signals, all moving together in a tight formation. For a long moment, nobody in the room spoke. "That is not a scouting mission," Maria said quietly. "No, ma'am," the officer answered. "Based on the size and formation, we believe this is a full invasion fleet." Maria's jaw tightened, but her voice remained calm. "Time until arrival?" "At their current speed, they will reach Earth's orbit within the hour." The room grew tense. A few of the younger technicians exchanged nervous glances. Maria noticed, and she stood, walking to the center of the room so everyone could see her. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice steady and clear. "This is not the first time our planet has faced a threat like this. We have prepared for this moment for a long time. Every system, every protocol, every plan we have built. This is exactly what it was built for." She turned to the officer. "Activate Protocol Sentinel. Alert Central Command. It is time." The officer nodded and rushed to his station, entering a long sequence of commands. Around the room, screens flickered to life one by one, revealing new information. Locations of hidden defense platforms, positions of automated systems, and quiet military bases spread carefully around the planet, built and maintained in secret for decades. Maria looked at the star map, at the massive alien fleet steadily approaching. "Let's show them what a primitive planet can really do," she said quietly. Back on the Zarkon flagship, an officer at the sensor station suddenly frowned, leaning closer to his screen. "My Emperor," he said, "we are receiving unusual energy readings from the human system." Draveth Kaur turned. "What kind of readings?" "Small at first, my lord, but growing. Several locations near the planet, and also much farther out, near the edge of the system." "Weapons platforms?" Draveth Kaur asked. "Unknown, my lord. The readings do not match any weapon signature in our database." Kesh stepped forward slightly, his eyes fixed on the screen. "How many locations?" The officer checked his readings. "At least 40, possibly more, spread across the entire system, not just near the planet." A murmur passed through the bridge. 40 individual energy sources, Kesh said slowly, hidden across their entire system, activating the moment our fleet approaches. Draveth Kaur's expression hardened, though his confidence did not waver. "It does not matter how many defense systems they have hidden. Our fleet outnumbers anything a single planet could build by 100 to 1. Continue forward." The fleet pressed onward, crossing the edge of the solar system. Inside Earth's control room, Maria watched as the alien fleet crossed an invisible line on her star map, a boundary her teams had marked years ago. "They've entered the outer marker," the officer announced. "Bring the outer defense grid online," Maria ordered. Far beyond Earth's orbit, hidden among asteroids and old satellites that looked abandoned and harmless from a distance, dozens of automated platforms silently activated. These were not simple weapons. They had been designed, tested, and improved over many years, built specifically for a moment like this, a moment humanity had always known might come. The first platform locked onto the lead scout ships of the Zarkon fleet. Then it fired. A beam of concentrated energy shot across the void, striking one of the smaller Zarkon vessels directly in its engine core. The ship shuddered violently, then broke apart in a silent flash of light. On the Ashbringer's bridge, alarms rang out. "We've lost a ship," an officer shouted. "Direct hit from an unknown position." "Location of the attacker?" Draveth Kor demanded. "Searching. My lord, we cannot locate the source. It fired from a hidden position among the debris field. No visible ship. No visible platform." Draveth Kor's hands tightened around the edge of his command chair. "Return fire. Destroy anything suspicious in that debris field." The fleet's weapons turned toward the asteroid field, unleashing a storm of energy blasts into the empty rocks and old satellites. Explosions lit up the darkness, one after another, as the Zarkon ships tried to destroy an enemy they could not clearly see. But more platforms hidden elsewhere in the system opened fire in return. One by one, Zarkon ships along the fleet's outer edge began taking damage, some losing weapons systems, others losing engines, a few disappearing entirely in bright flashes of light. "This is impossible," one general muttered. "A primitive planet does not have technology like this." Kesh's eyes remained fixed on the chaos unfolding across the screen. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "we have been wrong about what primitive means." Inside the underground control room on Earth, cheers broke out quietly among the younger technicians as the first wave of Zarkon ships suffered losses. 12 enemy ships destroyed, an officer reported. 6 more damaged and retreating from the outer defense zone. Maria allowed herself a small, tight smile, though she did not relax. "Good. But that is barely a scratch on a fleet this size. Do not celebrate yet." She turned to another technician. "Status of the main fleet formation?" "They are pushing through the outer defense zone, ma'am, moving toward the planet despite the losses. Estimated time until they reach orbit, 15 minutes. Maria studied the screen carefully. The Zarkon fleet, though wounded, was still massive. Thousands of ships continuing forward, unwilling to be stopped by a handful of hidden weapons platforms. "They're not turning back," she murmured. "Should we activate the inner defense grid, Colonel?" the officer asked. Maria paused, thinking carefully. The inner defense grid was Earth's true secret, something far more powerful than the outer platforms, something almost nobody outside this room even knew existed. Activating it too early could reveal too much before the right moment. "Not yet," she said. "Let them come closer first. Let them believe the outer defenses were the extent of what we have." She turned to the main communication station. "Contact Fleet Commander Reyes. Tell him it's time to move the Vanguard group into position, somewhere near the edge of the asteroid field, hidden inside a specially designed stealth formation. A small group of advanced human warships silently powered up their engines. These were not primitive vessels. They had been designed using decades of careful research, testing, and quiet development. Ships built not for show, but for the exact moment humanity might one day need them. Commander James Reyes sat in the cockpit of the lead ship, watching the massive Zarkon fleet approach on his display. His pilots waited silently, ready for his command. "Command confirms we are cleared to engage," his second officer said. Reyes studied the enemy formation carefully. Thousands of ships moving in tight, confident rows, unaware that a much smaller, much faster group of human vessels was hidden just beyond their detection range. "They think this is already won," Reyes said quietly. "Let's remind them why we've stayed quiet all these years." He gave the signal. The Vanguard group shot forward, weaving through the debris field at incredible speed, using the wreckage of the earlier battle as cover. Zarkon sensors, still recovering from the chaos of the outer defense grid, struggled to track the fast-moving human ships in time. On the Ashbringer's bridge, another alarm sounded. "New contacts. Small, fast-moving vessels approaching from the debris field." Draveth Kor turned sharply. "How many?" "Unclear, my lord. They are moving too quickly for accurate tracking." Before the officer could finish speaking, one of the escort cruisers near the fleet's flank exploded violently, struck by a precise, coordinated attack from multiple angles at once. Return fire, Draveth Kor shouted. Target those ships immediately. But the human vessels moved too fast, striking hard and retreating before the massive Zarkon warships could properly aim their heavy weapons. It was like trying to swat a swarm of fast-moving insects with a giant, slow hammer. Kesh watched carefully, studying the pattern of the attacks. They are not attacking randomly, he said. Look, every strike targets weapon systems or engines. They are disabling ships, not simply destroying them. Why would they do that? A general asked, confused. Kesh's expression grew serious. Because a species confident enough to disable rather than destroy is a species that is not afraid of a prolonged fight. Draveth Kor's composure finally began to crack, just slightly. Enough of this. Concentrate all forward weapons on the planet itself. If they wish to protect their world, let them choose between saving their ships or saving their home. The order sent a ripple of fear through even some of his own officers, but none dared question the Emperor's command. The main Zarkon fleet began shifting its formation, forward cannons charging, aiming toward the small blue planet ahead. Inside Earth's control room, tension rose sharply as new data streamed across the screens. Colonel, the main fleet is charging weapons, an officer said urgently. It looks like they intend to fire directly at the planet. Maria's eyes narrowed, but she did not panic. Anticipated. Bring the inner defense grid online. Full activation. All sectors. Across the planet, hidden systems long kept secret from the public, and even from many branches of the military itself began to awaken. Massive shield generators buried deep beneath oceans and mountains hummed to life. A layer of protection, invisible from space until the exact moment it was needed, began to form silently around the planet. Shield integrity at full capacity, a technician reported. Maria allowed herself a breath. Let's see how confident they remain now. On the Ashbringer, the forward cannons of the entire Zarkon fleet fired at once. A massive combined blast of energy aimed directly at Earth's surface, enough firepower to devastate a continent in a single strike. The blast crossed the distance in seconds. Then, just before it reached the planet, it struck something invisible. A massive shimmering barrier that flared brightly across the sky, absorbing the attack entirely. The explosion of energy rippled outward harmlessly, fading into space without leaving a single mark on the surface below. Silence fell across the Ashbringer's bridge. Impossible, Draveth Kor whispered. My Emperor, an officer said, his voice shaking slightly. The planet's shield. It absorbed our entire combined strike without any visible damage. Kesh stared at the screen, the shimmering barrier over Earth slowly fading back into invisibility, as if nothing had happened. They were never undefended, he said quietly. They were simply waiting. Draveth Kor's hands clenched tightly at his sides, his confidence shaken for the first time since the invasion began. He turned to his officers, his voice sharp with anger and disbelief. Charge every weapon system, fire everything we have now. Back on Earth, deep in the control room, the technicians watched as Zarkon sensors registered another massive weapons charge building across their fleet. They're preparing another strike, an officer said. Larger this time, possibly enough to test the shield's true limits. Maria studied the numbers carefully, her expression calm despite the tension in the room. Let them fire, she said. Colonel? They need to understand, Maria said, that this is not a battle they can win through brute force alone. She turned toward the main display, watching as the massive Zarkon fleet prepared its next attack, still unaware of exactly what it was truly facing. Around her, the room stayed quiet. Every technician focused on their own screen, tracking different parts of the unfolding battle. Maria walked slowly between the stations, checking reports, offering brief nods of reassurance where she could. She had trained for this moment for years, run simulations more times than she could count, yet nothing fully prepared a person for watching an actual alien fleet gather above their home. Colonel, a technician said suddenly, his voice tense, the enemy fleet's weapons charge just spiked. It's far beyond their previous strike. If this hits the shield directly, we won't know for certain it will hold. Maria's eyes remained steady, even as her pulse quickened slightly. The shield was tested for exactly this scenario. Trust the work that was done before tonight. And if the tests were wrong? The technician asked quietly. Maria did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked once more at the star map, at the massive fleet gathering its strength above her world, and at one small, strange reading that had just appeared on the very edge of the display. Something new, something that had not been there moments before. "Colonel," another officer called out, frowning at his own screen. "We're picking up an unusual pulse. It's not coming from the shield generators, and it's not coming from any of our defense platforms." Maria stepped closer, studying the faint signal for herself. It grew steadily stronger, pulsing in a slow, deliberate rhythm, entirely unlike anything her teams had built or activated that night. "Then what is it?" she asked quietly. Nobody in the room had an answer. On the enemy fleet sensors, that same strange pulse flickered across their screens as well. Faint at first, then growing stronger by the second, originating not from the planet's surface, but from somewhere entirely different, somewhere none of them had expected to look. The strange pulse grew stronger with every passing second. On the Ashbringer's bridge, officers stared at their screens, unable to explain what they were seeing. It was not coming from the planet's surface. It was not coming from the shield generators or the hidden defense platforms, or the small, fast-moving ships that had already caused so much damage. It was coming from somewhere far above the planet. "Location," Draveth Kor demanded. The sensor officer's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his readings. "My Emperor, it is coming from high orbit. Something large. Something that was not there when we first entered the system." "Impossible," a general muttered. "Our scans of this system were thorough. Nothing that size could have hidden from us." Kesh stepped forward, his eyes narrowing at the screen. "Unless it was never hidden," he said slowly. "Unless it simply looked like something else." As if answering his words, the object on the screen began to change shape. What had appeared to be a small drifting piece of space debris, one of thousands scattered harmlessly around the planet, unfolded slowly, revealing itself to be something far larger and far more dangerous than anyone on the Zarkon fleet had imagined. A massive human warship, easily 3 times the size of the Ashbringer, emerged fully from its disguise, its hull catching the distant light of the sun. The bridge fell into stunned silence. "That is not possible," Draveth Kor whispered. "Our scans showed nothing but debris in that position." "Perhaps," Kesh said quietly. "That was exactly the point." More murmurs spread across the bridge as officers stared at their screens, watching the newly revealed ship's true size become clear. It was unlike anything in the Zarkon Empire's records, sleek, powerful, covered in weapon emplacements that had been perfectly hidden moments before. "Scan its weapon systems," Draveth Kor ordered, trying to steady his voice. The sensor officer worked quickly, his hands moving fast across his console. After a moment, his face paled. "My Emperor, I cannot get a clear reading. Whatever technology they use to disguise this ship, it appears to still be interfering with our scanners even now that it has revealed itself." "Then we know nothing about what we're facing," a general said quietly. "We know one thing," Kesh said. "They allowed us to see it only when they were ready for us to see it. Nothing about tonight has happened by accident." Inside Earth's control room, Colonel Maria Chen watched the same event unfold on her own screens, a small, satisfied smile crossing her face for the first time that night. "The Endeavor is fully operational," a technician reported. "All systems green." "Good," Maria said. "It's time they saw what we've truly been building." The Endeavor had been under construction for nearly 15 years, built quietly in a hidden shipyard on the far side of the moon, disguised carefully to avoid detection from any passing alien scout. It was Earth's first true flagship, not simply a warship, but a statement. A message to the galaxy that humanity was done hiding what it could do. Maria remembered the early days of the project, back when she was a much younger officer, sitting in briefing rooms filled with scientists and generals who argued for years about whether such a ship should even be built. Some believed peace could be maintained through quiet diplomacy alone. Others believed the galaxy was far too dangerous a place for any species to remain unprepared. In the end, humanity chose a middle path. Build the strength, but never announce it. Prepare for war while hoping quietly that war would never come looking for them. Tonight, that hope had finally run out. "Bring her forward," Maria ordered. "Let's begin the second phase." On the Endeavor's bridge, high above Earth's surface, Fleet Admiral Sarah Osei stood at the command station, watching the massive Zarkon fleet spread out before her like a field of dark clouds. She had trained her entire life for this moment. So had every officer standing beside her. "Admiral, the enemy fleet has noticed us," an officer reported. "Good," Osei said calmly. "Let's introduce ourselves properly." She turned to her weapons officer. "Target their flagship's escort cruisers. Precise strikes only. Disable, don't destroy, wherever possible." "Understood, Admiral." The Endeavor's massive cannons powered up, glowing brightly along its hull, before releasing a series of controlled, precise strikes across the Zarkon fleet's forward ranks. Ship after ship lost power, their weapons and engines disabled in seconds, without a single explosion. "They're not destroying our ships," Kesh observed on the Ashbringer's bridge, his voice filled with disbelief. "They're disarming them, deliberately." "Why would they show such restraint?" a general asked, confused. Kesh's expression grew serious. "Because they do not need to destroy everything to win. They only need to prove they could, if they chose to." Draveth Kor's composure finally cracked entirely. "Enough of this humiliation," he shouted. "All ships converge fire on that vessel. Destroy it immediately." Hundreds of Zarkon warships turned their weapons toward the Endeavor, unleashing a massive combined barrage of energy blasts. The attack lit up the space around Earth like a second sun, enough firepower to level an entire continent concentrated on a single target. The Endeavor's shields flared brightly under the impact, absorbing blast after blast. For a tense moment, sparks flew across its hull, alarms blaring inside its bridge. "Shields at 60%, an officer called out. "Holding steady." Admiral Osei gripped the edge of her command console, watching the assault continue. "Divert additional power to forward shields. Return fire. Focused pattern. Target their central formation." The Endeavor answered with a devastating counterattack, cutting through the heart of the Zarkon fleet's central cluster. Ships crumpled under the precision of the strikes, their weapons and engines failing one after another. Elsewhere in the battle, smaller human ships, the Vanguard group led by Commander James Reyes, continued weaving through the chaos, striking quickly and retreating before the larger Zarkon vessels could properly respond. Reyes watched his display carefully as another Zarkon cruiser lost power under a precise strike from his squadron. "Nice shot, Lieutenant Park." "Thank you, sir," came the reply through his comm, though her voice carried the tension of the moment. A younger pilot, barely out of training, flew close beside Reyes's ship. His name was Ensign Daniel Cole, and this was his very first true battle. "Commander," Cole said, his voice shaking slightly, "there are so many of them. Are we really going to win this?" Reyes kept his eyes on his controls, guiding his ship through a narrow gap between two massive enemy cruisers. "Cole, listen to me. This isn't about matching them ship for ship. It never was. It's about making sure every single one of their commanders understands deep down that attacking us was the worst decision they've ever made." "And if they don't understand that in time?" Cole asked. "Then we make sure they understand it before this day is over," Reyes said firmly. A Zarkon fighter swept in suddenly from Cole's blind side, weapons locking onto his ship. Before it could fire, Reyes cut sharply across its path, releasing a precise burst that disabled its engines completely. "Stay sharp, Ensign," Reyes said calmly. "We look out for each other out here." Cole let out a shaky breath. "Understood, sir." "Thank you." A moment later, Cole's voice returned, steadier this time. "Commander, may I ask you something?" "Go ahead," Reyes said, still guiding his ship through the chaos. "Do you think they'll ever stop?" Cole asked. "Other empires, I mean. Do you think they'll ever stop testing us? Coming to see if we're truly as weak as we look from a distance?" Reyes was quiet for a moment, weaving past another disabled enemy cruiser before answering. "Maybe not right away. Pride is a hard thing to overcome, especially for an empire that has never lost before. But every ship we disable tonight, every commander who survives to carry this story home, that's one more reason for the next empire to think twice before trying the same thing." "And if they don't think twice?" Cole asked. "Then we'll be ready again," Reyes said simply. "The same way we were ready tonight." Back on the Ashbringer, Draveth Kor watched in growing disbelief as his once unstoppable fleet began to falter. Ship after ship reported disabled weapons, failing engines, and crews unable to fight back against an enemy that moved and struck with terrifying precision. "How is this happening?" he said quietly, almost to himself. "We outnumber them by hundreds." Kesh stepped closer, his voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around them. "Numbers alone have never guaranteed victory, my Emperor. Only understanding your enemy does. And we entered this battle, understanding nothing about them at all." Draveth Kor turned to him, anger and disbelief mixing in his expression. "You knew this would happen." "I feared it," Kesh corrected. "I did not know for certain, but I understood that a species capable of remaining hidden for so long, capable of building weapons like this in secret, was not a species we could simply overwhelm through numbers and pride." Draveth Kor said nothing for a long moment, watching the chaos unfold across his screens. Ships he had commanded for years, crews he had personally reviewed before this campaign began, now drifted powerless through space, their weapons silent, their engines dead. It was a sight he had never once imagined possible, not in all his years of conquest. "I was so certain," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Every report told me they were weak. Every advisor except you told me this would be simple." "Pride tells commanders what they wish to hear," Kesh said gently. "It rarely tells them what they need to know." An explosion rocked the Ashbringer itself, throwing several officers from their stations. Alarms blared across the bridge. "Direct hit to our secondary engines," an officer shouted. "We've lost maneuverability." Draveth Kor gripped his command chair tightly. "Status of the fleet? We've lost over 200 ships, my lord. Another 300 report critical damage. The rest are struggling to maintain formation under continuous attack." The Emperor's face, once filled with absolute confidence, now carried the weight of a terrible realization. "This cannot be happening," he whispered. Inside the Endeavor's bridge, Admiral Osei studied the shifting battle with careful focus. The Zarkon fleet, though still massive, was clearly losing cohesion, their formations breaking apart under continuous coordinated strikes. "Their flagship has lost maneuverability," an officer reported. "It's drifting near the edge of the debris field." Osei's eyes sharpened. "Then it's time to close the trap." She turned to her communications officer. "Signal the Vanguard group and the outer defense platforms. Begin encirclement pattern Delta. I want that flagship completely surrounded within the next 10 minutes. "Yes, Admiral." Across the battlefield, smaller human ships shifted their positions with practiced precision, closing in around the drifting Zarkon flagship from multiple angles at once. The outer defense platforms, still hidden among the debris field, adjusted their aim toward the same target. Slowly, methodically, the Ashbringer found itself surrounded, its escort ships either destroyed or too damaged to offer meaningful protection. Draveth Kor watched the tightening circle of human vessels on his display, each one moving with calm, practiced precision, as though this exact moment had been planned and rehearsed many times before tonight. There was no panic in their formation, no hesitation in their approach. It was the movement of a species that had expected this fight long before the first Zarkon scout ship had ever entered their system. "Signal our remaining escort ships," he said quietly. "Order them to attempt a breakout toward the outer edge of the debris field." "My Emperor," an officer said hesitantly, "our remaining escorts number less than a dozen. The human formation has already sealed every viable route." Draveth Kor's hands tightened on the arms of his command chair. For the first time since taking the throne, he felt something he had never truly experienced before, the cold, creeping certainty that victory was no longer within his reach. On the Ashbringer's bridge, the reality of the situation became clear to everyone present. "My Emperor," an officer said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We are surrounded. Escape routes are being cut off systematically." Draveth Kor stared at the tactical display, watching human ships close in from every direction, their formation tightening with terrifying precision. "They planned this," he said slowly. "From the very beginning. The outer defenses, the hidden ships, even the flagship's late arrival. All of it, every part of this battle, was designed to lead exactly to this moment." Kesh nodded grimly. "They did not simply defend their planet today, my Emperor. They demonstrated deliberately and completely precisely how dangerous provoking them truly is. Draveth Kor lowered himself slowly into his command chair, the weight of the situation finally settling over him. What do we do now? Kesh was quiet for a long moment before answering. I do not know if there is anything left to do, my Emperor, except wait, and see what they intend for us next. Aboard the Endeavor, Admiral Osi watched as the last of the Zarkon fleet's outer defenses fell silent, their weapons disabled, their formations broken entirely. Only the flagship remained, trapped and powerless at the center of a tightening circle of human ships. Admiral, her communications officer said, Colonel Chen is requesting a direct channel to your bridge. Put her through, Osei said. Maria Chen's voice came through clearly. Admiral, how does the battle stand? The Zarkon fleet is neutralized, Osei reported. Their flagship is completely surrounded with no viable escape route remaining. There was a brief pause on the line. And Earth's ultimate contingency? Maria asked carefully. Should we prepare to reveal it? Osei glanced toward the trapped Zarkon flagship on her screen, its lights flickering weakly amid the wreckage surrounding it. Not yet, she said. Let's give them one final chance to understand what they're truly facing before we show them everything. She turned back to her own crew, her voice steady and clear. Open a channel to the Zarkon flagship. It's time they heard directly from us. On the Ashbringer's bridge, a new signal suddenly appeared on the main display. A direct communication request, originating from the massive human warship holding them trapped. Draveth Kor stared at the flashing signal for a long moment, his pride and his fear locked in a silent, desperate struggle within him. Every instinct built over decades of conquest told him to refuse, to order his remaining ships to fight to the last rather than accept a conversation from an enemy that had humiliated his empire so completely. Yet another part of him, quieter but growing stronger with each passing second, understood that refusing this channel would change nothing about the fleet's situation, except perhaps whether or not any of them survived to see their homeworld again. Kesh watched him carefully, saying nothing, waiting. Around the bridge, officers stood frozen, watching their emperor, waiting for a decision that would shape everything that happened next, not just for this fleet, but perhaps for the entire Zarkon Empire. Finally, he gave the order. Open the channel. The screen flickered, and for the first time since this campaign began, the Zarkon Empire was about to hear directly from the species it had so badly underestimated. The screen flickered to life. On the Ashbringer's bridge, every officer held their breath as an image appeared before them. Not a monster, not a machine, but a human woman standing calmly on the bridge of her own ship, her expression steady and unshaken. It was Admiral Sarah Osi. Emperor Draveth Kor, she said, her voice clear and even. My name is Admiral Osi, commanding officer of the Earth Defense Fleet. Your ships are surrounded. Your weapons are largely disabled, and your flagship no longer has a viable path of retreat. Draveth Kor straightened in his command chair, forcing what remained of his pride into his posture. You have won this battle, he said, but you have not won a war. My empire has thousands of worlds behind me. Destroy this fleet, and 1,000 more will come in its place. Osi's expression did not change. We have no interest in destroying your fleet, Emperor. If we wished for that outcome, this conversation would not be happening. Every ship you have lost tonight lost its weapons, its engines, or its shields, not its crew. We do not kill unless we are given no other choice. A murmur passed through the Ashbringer's bridge. Kesh, standing quietly near the Emperor's chair, felt a strange mixture of relief and disbelief settle over him. For 3 days, he had feared exactly this outcome, and yet hearing it confirmed, in the calm, measured voice of a human commander, felt different than he had imagined. Then what do you want? Draveth Kor asked. Understanding, Osei said simply. You came here believing humanity to be weak, primitive, and undefended. We allowed that belief to exist for a long time, because we hoped it would never be tested. Tonight, it was tested. And now, we would like the truth to travel back with you to your Emperor's court, and beyond it to every other empire watching this system from a distance. Draveth Kor's officers exchanged uneasy glances. Several of them had spent the entire campaign confident of an easy victory, and now found themselves struggling to reconcile that confidence with the wreckage scattered across their sensors. "You speak as though this outcome was guaranteed from the start," Draveth Kaur said. "As though nothing we did tonight could have changed the result." "Very little would have changed it," Osei admitted honestly. "We built our defenses over many years, testing every scenario we could imagine, preparing for exactly the kind of overwhelming force you brought tonight. Your fleet was large, Emperor, but size alone rarely wins a battle against an enemy who has already studied every possible version of that fight." Draveth Kaur said nothing for a long moment, absorbing the weight of her words. Deep beneath Earth's surface inside the control room, Colonel Maria Chen watched the exchange carefully. Her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "She's giving him a choice," a technician said quietly. "She's giving him something more valuable than that," Maria replied. "She's giving him a story to carry home, one that might prevent the next fleet from ever leaving its shipyard." The technician glanced at her, curious. "Do you think it will work, Colonel? Do you think one emperor's account will really stop other empires from trying the same thing?" Maria considered the question carefully before answering. "Not entirely, no. There will always be some commander somewhere who believes his fleet is different, that his strategy is better, that the stories are exaggerated. But every empire that hears this story and chooses caution instead of conquest is one less battle we have to fight. That is worth far more than the cost of building everything you see around you tonight." On the screen, Draveth Kaur sat in silence, clearly weighing his next words carefully. Around him, his officers waited, many of them glancing nervously at Kesh, the one advisor among them who had predicted this outcome from the very beginning. "What truth do you wish me to carry?" Draveth Kaur finally asked. Osei's expression softened just slightly. "That humanity does not seek conquest. We did not build the Endeavor, or the defense platforms, or the Vanguard fleet, because we wish to expand our borders across the galaxy. We built them because history taught us long ago that peace without strength is simply an invitation for someone, eventually, to test that peace by force." She paused, letting her words settle before continuing. "Tonight your empire tested that peace. And now you understand more clearly than any report or old trader's story could ever explain exactly what awaits any force that tries again." Kesh stepped forward slightly, addressing the screen directly, drawing surprised glances from several officers around him. "Admiral," he said, "if I may ask a question." Osei's eyes shifted toward him. "Go ahead. You said you do not seek conquest," Kesh said carefully. "Yet you built weapons capable of defeating an empire's entire invasion fleet in a single night. Weapons like that are rarely built purely for defense alone." Osei considered his question for a long moment. "You are right to notice that," she said. "Strength like ours could easily be turned toward conquest, if we chose that path. But history has shown us, again and again, that empires built through conquest eventually collapse under their own weight, through rebellion, through overextension, through the simple impossibility of controlling too much, spread too thin, for too long." She continued, her voice calm but firm. "We choose a different path. We protect what is ours. We help those who ask for help. But we do not take what does not belong to us. That choice has cost us less than you might expect, and it has earned us something far more valuable than territory. The certainty that any war brought to our door will end exactly as tonight has ended." Kesh nodded slowly, a strange mixture of respect and unease crossing his expression. He had studied countless empires throughout his long service, yet he had never encountered a philosophy quite like the one Osei described so plainly. Draveth Kaur listened to the exchange in silence, his mind turning over everything he had witnessed since the Rakthu's destruction 3 days ago. The warnings he had dismissed, the evidence he had ignored, the pride that had driven him to send an entire armada against a species he had never truly bothered to understand. "What happens now?" he finally asked, his voice quieter than it had been at any point during the entire campaign. "Your surviving ships will be released," Osei said. "Their weapon systems will remain disabled until you have cleared our system entirely, as a precaution, not a punishment. Your crews will return home safely, and you, Emperor, will carry this message back to your empire, exactly as you heard it tonight." "And if I refuse to accept these terms?" Draveth Kaur asked, one last flicker of pride surfacing in his voice. Osei's expression remained calm, though something firmer entered her tone. Then your flagship remains exactly where it is, Emperor, until you reconsider. We are not in a hurry. Your empire, however, will notice quite quickly when its emperor and his entire flagship fail to return. The threat, delivered so calmly and without any anger at all, carried far more weight than any shouted warning could have managed. Drevethkor understood, in that moment, that there was truly no version of this night that ended with anything other than humiliation for his empire. He closed his eyes briefly, gathering the last of his composure. "I accept your terms, Admiral," he said quietly. Within the hour, the disabled Zarkon ships began powering down their weapons entirely, drifting slowly into a loose formation as human vessels guided them carefully back toward the edge of the solar system. No further shots were fired, no further ships were lost. The battle that had begun with such overwhelming confidence ended not with total destruction, but with a quiet, humbling retreat. Aboard the Ashbringer, Kesh stood beside Drevethkor as the fleet began its slow withdrawal. "You were right," the Emperor said quietly, staring out at the massive human warship still holding position above the blue planet. "About everything." "I take no satisfaction in that, my Emperor," Kesh said honestly. "I only wish you had listened before 300 ships paid the price for a lesson that might have been learned through words alone." Drevethkor nodded slowly, the weight of the night settling deeply into his expression. "When we return home, the court will ask why we retreated. Some will call it weakness. Others will call for immediate retaliation, a second fleet, larger than the first." "And what will you tell them?" Kesh asked. Drevethkor turned to look at him directly. "I will tell them the truth. That we sent an armada against a species we did not understand, and that species showed us more restraint and more strength than any empire we have ever encountered. I will tell them that the next commander who wishes to test humanity's defenses should prepare to lose everything and gain nothing in return." Kesh allowed himself a small, tired smile. "That, my Emperor, might be the wisest thing you have said since this campaign began." Drevethkor let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Careful, old friend. Compliments like that delivered after a defeat like this could almost sound like an insult." "Perhaps it is both," Kesh said. "A wise decision, born from a painful lesson. Most lasting wisdom tends to arrive that way." They stood together in silence for a while longer, watching the wounded fleet gather itself for the long journey home. Neither of them spoke of the cost. The ships lost, the crews shaken, the pride that would take far longer to heal than any hull damage. Some lessons, Kesh knew, simply had to be carried quietly, for a long time, before their true value became clear. Back on Earth, deep inside the control room, cheers finally broke out freely among the technicians as the last Zarkon ships crossed the outer boundary of the solar system, disappearing into the safety of deep space. Maria allowed herself to relax slightly for the first time since the alert had first sounded. She turned to her second-in-command. "Casualties?" "Minimal, Colonel. A handful of injuries among the Vanguard pilots. No fatalities reported." Maria closed her eyes briefly, quiet relief washing over her. "Get me Admiral Osei." Moments later, Osei's voice came through clearly. "Colonel Chen, it's done." "I saw," Maria said. "You handled that better than I could have hoped." "We got lucky," Osei admitted. "If their emperor had been slightly more stubborn, this could have ended very differently, perhaps," Maria said. "Or perhaps he simply understood in the end exactly what kind of message he needed to carry home." Far above Earth, aboard the Endeavour, young Ensign Daniel Cole sat quietly in the pilot's seat of his small fighter, watching the last of the Zarkon fleet vanish into the darkness of deep space. Beside him, Commander Reyes guided his own ship back toward the Endeavour's landing bay. "We really did it," Cole said quietly, still processing everything that had happened over the last few hours. "We did," Reyes said, "though I imagine tonight is only the beginning." "What do you mean?" Cole asked. Reyes glanced toward the retreating Zarkon fleet one final time before answering. "Word travels fast among the stars, Ensign. Tonight, one empire learned the truth about humanity the hard way. Somewhere out there, other empires will hear this story too, one way or another. Some will believe it immediately. Others won't believe it until they test it themselves." "Do you think more will come?" Cole asked quietly. "Maybe." Reyes admitted. But if they do, they'll find exactly what the Zarkon Empire found tonight. A planet that looks quiet and undefended from a distance, right up until the moment someone foolish enough to attack it discovers otherwise. Weeks later, deep within Zarkon territory, Emperor Draveth Kor stood once again before his full council, recounting the events of that single humbling night above Earth. Many nobles listened in stunned silence. A few scoffed, calling it exaggeration or cowardice dressed up as caution. One young general, eager to prove himself, rose to speak. "My emperor, with respect, perhaps a second fleet. Better prepared this time, using everything we learned." "Everything we learned?" Draveth Kor interrupted, his voice sharp enough to silence the room. "Is that we understood nothing about this species before we attacked them. A second fleet, armed with the same ignorance, would fare no better than the first. I will not send more of our people to die, proving a lesson I have already learned at great cost." The young general sat down quietly, chastened. But Kesh, standing quietly at the emperor's side, noticed something important in the room that night. A quiet shift in the way certain generals studied their star maps afterward, a new caution in how border fleets were positioned near unknown, unexplored systems. It was not fear exactly, it was something closer to respect, however grudging and unspoken. Word of humanity's warning spread slowly across the galaxy in the months that followed, through traders, through diplomats, through quiet whispers among fleet commanders who had heard the story secondhand and chosen, wisely, not to test it themselves. Not every empire believed the story completely. Some dismissed it as legend, exaggerated retelling meant to excuse a humiliating defeat. But enough believed it, and enough chose caution over pride, that Earth remained undisturbed for a long time afterward. A quiet blue planet watching the stars carefully, waiting patiently for whoever might come next. In the years that followed, humanity did not seek to expand its reach across the galaxy, exactly as Admiral Osei had promised on that fateful night. But it did begin to speak more openly with other species, sharing careful, measured diplomacy in places where quiet strength had once been humanity's only voice. Some empires, cautious after hearing what happened to the Zarkon fleet, chose friendship over hostility. Others kept their distance, unwilling to risk finding out firsthand whether the stories were true. And on quiet nights deep in Zarkon space, old advisor Kesh would sometimes look up at the same stars, remembering a warning he had given long before that fateful night, a warning almost nobody had chosen to believe, until it was very nearly too late. "They said humans were primitive," he would sometimes murmur to himself, recalling the confidence that had once filled his emperor's throne room. "They learned too late. Some fires should never be lit."